What is up everyone on YouTube, and today we have another tier list for you guys today. And as you guys can see, we're talking all about the 4-star Moonlight units in this game and how they rank for PvP. Now this tier list is pretty simple. We have 4 separate tiers. First we have the very meta tier, pretty self-explanatory. These units are going to be the best of the best. Then we have the strong tier. These units are going to be, as stated, strong in the current meta, especially if you pick them into certain units. Then we have the niche tier. These units are only able to be played as counter picks. And then we have the bad tier. These units are just not good. So let's start off with the very meta tier. So first off, we have Moon Bunny Dominion. Now, I think Moon Bunny Dominion is a very meta-changing unit, because in the past we had a ton of extra turn units, right? We had Lionheart Sermia, we have Conquer Lilius, we have Lua, Noggle, and they're very powerful in this game, even Spectre Tenebria to an extent with her Soulburn S1. But Moon Bunny Dominion is a very powerful unit into all those units, because her S2 will actually give your team Skill Nullifier and Immunity after an extra turn is taken on the enemy turn. Now, it doesn't mean you can't play extra turn units into Moon Bunny Dominion, but Moon Bunny Dominion is very powerful against them, and it gives your team so much survivability that if you pick her early in the draft in RTA, it'll dissuade the enemy from picking them. And if you pick Moon Bunny Dominion into those units, it usually ends up in a ban. Now, in Guild Wars offense, she's also very powerful against those pesky Conquer Lilius defenses, so she is a very solid pick, and she is definitely meta-defining. Next up, we have Angel of Light Angelica. No surprise to anyone, one of the best debuffers in the game, if not the best. Her S3 is just ridiculous with that AoE strip, silence, and unbuffable, extremely annoying to fight against. She also has an S2 to actually CR push herself when anyone on your team takes damage. She also has a skill nullifier for your team with a cleanse built into that S2. And her S1 has a silence that you can soul burn for a 100% chance, and also CR push back the enemy. Just a very overloaded kit. Very powerful on defense teams, very powerful on offense teams, and you will commonly see her in RTA or World Arena. And if the enemy picks her, you really have to respond with a cleanser. If you don't, she becomes a must ban, because if she gets her S3 off and you don't have an answer, it will pretty much end up in a loss, I'd say like 90% of the time, and that is why she's also very powerful. I think these units, both of these units, are extremely strong in the current meta. I would say like borderline OP, if not OP. And because of that, they're in their separate tier. You can reverse them around, honestly. It's really up to your playstyle and how you want to actually play. If you like to actually use debuffers, Angel of Light will definitely be better. If you like to actually counter those speed openers and like to play a more standard style or even like an aggressive style, Moon Bunny Dominion is definitely for you. Next up, we have the strong tier. So these units are still very strong, but they will have some counterplay, and we'll talk about what their counters are, but we'll also talk about why they're very strong. First up, we have Tempest Cern. So I think Tempest Cern is very powerful. I think I might be overrating her a little bit, but I think she's very good because of the fact that she is very strong as a solo DPS. If you pick her into like Spectre Tenebria teams, or if you pick her into team comps that actually rely on winning very fast, such as Cleave teams, she can shut down Cleave by herself and actually cut and win you the game. And she is a very powerful AoE damage dealer. The only thing I don't like about her is that she's very weak to extra damage, like Karina's S3. Rocket Punch Gauntlet completely destroys her. Rimura's S3, any burn detonation effects, any double attacks, right? But she's very good otherwise, and she becomes very annoying. In her past, when she was strong before, she was known as the Cockroach, and there is a reason why. It's because she's super annoying to deal with. If she's on Alexa's basket and she procs greater attack buff with her S3, it's going to be a bad time for you. You're going to take a ton of damage. She also has a silence built in, which is super annoying, and she can actually dispel buffs now, which is also very annoying. She's a very strong unit, but you have to keep in mind that you don't pick her into, like I said, extra attack teams. Next, we have Broman, Benevolent Roman. This guy got buffed, and he is toxic. He has that AoE silence that's 2 turns. He has that defense break, right? So even Meteor Cowrick can't actually cleanse his team. He also has that random CR pushback, some RNG built in. Very strong in Guild Wars defense. He's very underrated. I think people are catching on, but I think he's very solid on defense teams right now if you have the right defense around him with like Senya and like Lilius. He's also good in offense if you actually pick him in the slower teams, and in RTA he punishes slower teams very well. The only thing is he does get countered by units like Edward Elric, and he is not that fast, so like if he's too slow and doesn't take the first turn, he actually just dies and does nothing. Whereas Angel of Light, on the other hand, if she doesn't take the first turn, she's still very useful with her S2 and just that threat actually being there with her skill nullifier and stuff like that. But Benevolent Roman is kind of different in that if he has to take the first turn with his team, or he is kind of useless. Next we have Watcher Shuri. So Watcher Shuri, very strong cleave pick because of that speed imprint, but he's also very good at Guild Wars offense and just destroying tanks. So if you're cleaving, he's very good to actually one-shot like defense scaling tanks such as Icarina and stuff like that. If you're playing Guild Wars offense, you can pick him into slower teams and just one-shot a tank right off the bat, such as like Senyas and stuff like that as well. Just very strong to have. The only thing is, like I said, if you don't take the first turn with him, he's pretty useless. He just dies. You can kind of manipulate this in Guild Wars offense, but for the most part in RTA, if you're drafting him to take the first turn for that speed imprint. Next we have Last Piece Karen, very solid evasion unit counter. The only thing, there's a lot of those units right now. We have Briar Witch Asaria and Zahak. They kind of do that job a little bit better because they have way more utility. In that Briar Witch Asaria has stealth with Guiding Light, and has immortality, and it's very annoying to deal with, and a defense break. And Zahak also has that invincibility, so he lives longer and hits very hard and can cleanse the unit and buff his team with an attack buff. So Last Piece Karen doesn't really do any of that, but she still hits a little bit harder than them. But honestly, the current evasion units, they're very squishy. So with Zahak and Briar Witch, they're usually enough anyways. They don't need that much damage, they just need to bring that extra utility, and they're way more useful. Whereas LPK, Last Piece Karen, is just very front-loaded damage-wise, and you don't really need all that damage, to be honest. Next, we have Crimson Armin. So Crimson Armin, very solid tank. She's very good with like Mei Chloe comps, right? Obviously, if you guys play RTA and you faced Crimson Armin and Mei Chloe, you guys know what I'm talking about. But she's very good with just very slow comps that she wants to stall out for. You have to actually build your team around her though. You have to speed tune so that your Crimson Armin either goes first, and you want her to be extremely fast and your other units to be very slow, or you want her to go last so that she can actually put that invincibility buff up and actually keep your team shielded. Just a lot of ways to play around with her, but she's a very versatile unit, very solid tank, and I think one of the best knights for PvP out there. Next we have the niche tier. So we're going to talk about these units kind of briefly and what niche they actually fill. These units will be like counter picks for the most part and not, generally pickable, but in their counters they're very strong. So Inferno Kawazu. Inferno Kawazu is a counter to AoE units, very strong. Navy Captain Landy, he destroys. Even Last Rider Crow, he's very good against as well. He can one-shot a lot of units. Very powerful unit. Troublemaker Crozet, I think he's mostly an anti-cleave unit now, so he's a very good anti-cleave knight. But outside of that, you're not going to really see him. Wander's Sulk, very good for cleavers. One of the best cleave openers in the game. Also has the best speed imprint, just numbers-wise, so it makes her very strong. Acid, very good counter to cleave if you have good speed gear. Also punishes some squishier openers if they don't have a high speed tier, right? So you have to keep that in mind. The only thing is, Zio's just a better Acid right now, and honestly, like Acid, you have to be very confident in your speed to make him work. Assassin Cartusia, good with evasion units, pretty much it. He's kind of cheesy, but he's still good. General Purges, good against cleave. He's very underrated. I think in the past when he was OP, he was like the OG cleave counter, but right now, he's still a decent cleave counter. ML Acades, she's decent as a counter to openers, but she's too RNG heavy, but she does have a niche because she can actually be very good against heavy debuff comps, and we have a lot of debuffs right now, so I think her stock has gone up. Central Angelica, only going to be for cleavers or for Guild Wars offense against revivers, but honestly, her niche is filled by a lot of units. There's a lot of anti-revive right now, so the best thing about it is that attack buff. So if you need an attack buffer to counter revive units and you don't have good extinction units, she's a good option. Fighter Maya, she's a good defense scaling tank. She's pretty good on Rocket Punch Gauntlet, but pretty much every knight is that scales with defense, so she's okay. Yeah, I don't think she's that great, but she is usable. Next we have Cdom, good for cleavers. If you have a opener that can actually, guarantee that she takes the second turn, then she's very good with her S3 to push up your team and just one-shot a unit with Soulburn S1. But there's a lot of counters to her, so you have to be careful, like Politis, Bellion, because she really relies on Soulburns. Just anything that counters non-attack skills gets really, really good value against Cdom. Acid, or A-Koli, sorry. Assassin Koli, kind of a worse version than Assassin Sid, but she's more waifu, so that's why a lot of people build her. I'm gonna be honest, like, I also built her before Assassin Sid because I was like, no way am I using a dude. Just kidding, but Assassin Koli's decent opener, similar to Assassin Sid, but so I think she's a little bit worse because she's a little bit harder to build. Next we have Auxiliary Lots. Decent as like an early game, mid game CR pusher if you don't have like Amelia with attack buff, but otherwise not going to be really used that much. His speed tier is too low. Blade Karin, very strong as anti-cleave and can punish teams that don't have a way to actually deal with her or strip her immortality, and is very squishy. Crescent Moon Rin, very good opener, but just the worst version of Acid. She has a little bit more of more gimmicks with like her buff stealing and stuns, but honestly I don't think she's that great. And that ends the niche tier. So let's go to the bad tier. No, let's not talk about them, they're just bad. So honestly, these units are not really meant for PvP, except like Peacemaker Furious and I guess Shooting Star Arcades, who can be niche if you have like a immortality comp, but not really. But Peacemaker Furious needs a buff, he's just not good. Champion Zerato is a good anti-debuff unit, but not anymore. Edward Elric is kind of just a way better version of him, so you're not going to really see him anymore. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this tier list though, guys. If you guys have any disagreements, let me know in the comments down below. I'm curious what you guys think, and I hope you guys have a good New Year's.